My dad told me years ago, the guy that doesn't make mistakes doesn't do anything. And I think he had a good, valid point. I was lucky enough to get into the railroads out in Oregon when they were still, well, it was the last week of steam that I got in there. They were going to change over to diesel. A little shingle side the road said Railroad Camp. And somehow or other, I couldn't hold that Oldsmobile. It headed right up that road. Guy that retires, good friend of mine, we took compulsory retirement. We got up every morning, stood on the doorstep, oh my Lord, another day. He didn't know what to do. I get up in the morning and, oh boy, another day. All in the tone of voice you use. Oh, Lord, I had toy trains, I had old gauge, I had double O, I had HO, and I had a lot of HO, and I decided to get into the bigger gauges. And then all of a sudden, I decided hernia gauge was too much for an old man. I went back into HO, and then one day I said, to heck with the HO, I sold it all and got back into hernia gauge again, which, well, you don't just sit back and watch it go. You go with it.
Well, this engine here, 774, is the last Camelback that ever ran actively on the Jersey Central. In fact, it was almost reserved for a museum. Well, I made a model. Has a boiler pressure of 125 pounds of steam, and it burns regular coal, which we have to go all the way to Virginia to get. Everything about this engine, as any other model steam locomotive, they operate the same way as their full-size sisters. Right here is a miniature steam turbo generator that actually generates electricity to light the headlights, and as it did on a full-size model. And this engine has just about every component on it that was on the full-size engine. Even the whistle. We had the blueprints for the whistle, and the whistle was tuned on a pipe organ to come up with the right note. So this whistle on this engine sounds exactly the same as the full-size locomotive.
And the live steam bunch, the fellas themselves are so darn nice. And I know, Lord, I take that locomotive of mine, and I've been from Owl's Head, Maine to the other side of Charleston, West Virginia to shows. The year before the wife died, we went to 20 shows in 21 weeks. And sleep in the back of the truck, sleep in a station wagon, sleep on the ground, eat hot dogs and hamburgers and get indigestion, and, oh, we had a ball! Then come home and sleep for a week.
This is a saddle tank locomotive. You can tell by the horseshoe-shaped tank that's on there. The water tank is copper. It's 100% copper, and it's riveted and soldered. It's manufactured the same way coppersmiths have made copper articles for hundreds of years. The copper was flanged over formers to make the shape that you see. And we rolled the inside and outside sheets, drilled all the holes, riveted it together. It's fired by propane gas because I'm lazy. It's a whole lot cleaner than coal. It's 4 years in the making. It's still not finished, as you can see. We got a little bit of a machine shop in the cellar. Very little. Doesn't have to be. It's very modest. You don't need a lot. Anybody can do it. Doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs. I know laborers who've got little light steam locomotives that just happen to like it. It's addictive, just like the real thing. Part for part. This is just like the original locomotive.
Get this fire broken up so I get a better draft up through the grates. And this needs a little more coal. There we go. That ought to hold it for about 10 minutes. We'll have plenty of steam up by that time. It carries 120 pounds of steam pressure, so these are all tested. This is tested to 200 pounds hydrostatically to prevent an explosion.
It never blew up, huh?
Oh, no, heavens no.
Well, you couldn't rebuild it, huh?
Wouldn't want to. None of these ever blew.
Here at Pioneer Valley, we have 3 gauges. 3.5-inch gauge, which is 1/16 full size, 4.75-inch gauge, which is 1/12, and then 7.25, which is approximately 1/8 full size. We are largely live steamers, but every now and then we do allow simulated diesel engines, gasoline engines, and whatnot to pollute the rails.
And how long have you been involved in this?
I've been involved in this for 30 years.
Been a member of the steamers for 30 years?
Been a member of the live steamers for 30 years. 1958, I joined.
No, let's do it. 59, 69, 79, 89. That's almost 30 years out.
This club here is probably, 36 years old, and it's one of the oldest clubs in the United States, if not the oldest. The New Jersey Live Steamers, even though they had a lease on the land here, the New Jersey Live Steamers started about 5 or 6 years after this one did, and we bought our property. And about a year after that, these people here turned their 99-year lease into purchasing of the property.
My father was in the hobby, and everything in the house was railroad. We went on fan trips, and fan trips is when the railroads run prototype locomotives, and it just stayed with me. It was something that the novelty never wore off, whether it be locomotives or sailing ships or the history of our country, whatever it was, as long as it was historical.
What hurt was they took steam locomotives that weren't 10 years old. They were in their prime, and they cut them up for scrap. The New Havens, the ones they ran down the shoreline, the 1400s, they were the first steam locomotive designed as streamliners. There had been streamliners, but they were an existing locomotive with a shroud hung on them. And they built them 1400s, ran them down the shore, and 10 years later, they took the torch to them. And they were, man, they were fast.
I remember one time a friend of mine was operating my locomotive, and he happened to split a switch and turn it over on the side, and it took me 4 or 5 years to get him on one of my locomotives again.
What happened to the car?
It
We
went off.
derailed.
Off the rail over there.
Split a switch last night.
See, it seemed like one of these wasn't letting it go, but I couldn't see it.
Yeah, well, we couldn't see it last night.
No.
A rock got caught in the switch, and the switch went part way.
Yep.
Oh, we have derailments and that sort of thing that sometimes turn out to be kind of funny, and some of them are, not too many of them are disastrous.
I've gotten the impression that you really find a lot of eccentric people in this hobby. Would you comment on that? Or tell me?
I think it, you don't have to be crazy, but it helps.
Engine's like a woman, you gotta take care of it.
Learning to use machine tools when you had no instructor and you had to figure it out yourself. You made a lot of scrap iron. The first lathe I bought, I filled out a questionnaire. The last question was, what is your principal product? And I put down the truth, scrap.
My first locomotive, I had no machine experience at all, and I think I made every piece in that locomotive at least 4 times. I spent 7 years on my first locomotive.
Gee.
Hi, this is my shop. This is what I call the Woodstock Locomotive Works. And I'll give you a little brief tour if you don't mind here. Right, what you see here is the boiler assembly for a Baldwin Malley locomotive. That's a compound Malley. The original was built about 1909. Right over here we have the chassis of that Baldwin Malley. You can see it has 4 cylinders, and it is going under what we call Class 3 repairs. That is, most everything major is being done to it. Over here we have a consolidation locomotive. It's a brand new locomotive being built, 280 configuration, and it's being built on the speculation. Hope to sell it sometime this summer. It's basically going to represent this locomotive here. This is a locomotive about 1920, a 280, built by Baldwin Locomotive Works.
I decided in 1960 that I was going to get out of the model train, that is the electric model train, and go into live steam. I sold all my HO equipment that I had, and with what I realized from that, I put it towards the castings for an 1.5" scale Pacific. I went out and started buying machinery a little bit at a time, tools a little bit at a time. I had access to machinery that I needed to do the work I wanted for a good portion of it. And I begged, borrowed from this one and that one. It's what I...
Bar stock.
Yeah, what I needed, whether it'd go into a junk pile and pick up material from the junk pile, or if I had to buy it and go out and buy it.
A lot of dedication, though. I mean,
But yeah, you had to have a lot of stick to it. Otherwise, you didn't get the project done. It's going back in time just about, except in miniature. The fuel is the same, the smell is the same, and the operation is the same as the real thing, except in miniature. And you get the same sensation as you would if you were on the real thing. But with a steam locomotive, you can be standing trackside and not even riding the thing. and get satisfaction in seeing something go by and seeing its innards on the outside working. And when you build one of your own, then you appreciate what you've done and what you have. It's something that you can take part in physically, whereas when you were on the real thing, it was just a ride.
Well, the water in the boiler was getting down there, and I had to put some water in the boiler. So to do that, you have to raise the steam pressure because we were letting the engine sit here idle, and the steam pressure had gone down. And in order to put water in the boiler, you have to raise the steam pressure to use the injector.
Well, you go somewhere and some guy comes over and he's interested in your steam project, whichever one you may have with you. So you give him your card. And he says, oh, yeah, I'm a live steamer too. I just built this. Right away you got a common bond. There was a gentleman in New Haven, built the nicest live steam locomotives to no strict scale, just out of his head. And he was a laborer. We have a guy down at the club that is a lawyer. I mean a corporation, big shot lawyer. He's also got a couple of locomotives he built. There is our common ground. I don't know anything about law. I don't want to know anything about digging a ditch. But we've got a common bound in our live steam.
As far as original blueprints, do you go back to original plans?
Yeah, I don't really get blueprints. There's a big book called the Locomotive Cyclopedia that's put out for the actual full-size railroads. I got my hands on one of those dated in 1930, and they have a side elevation, a front elevation drawing with dimensions, and I usually work from that. I estimate that I've never spent over $500 for one of these things, not counting labor.
To build an engine?
Yeah. So you go out and buy boats or play golf every week or anything, and that's probably more expensive than this. But they estimate around 2,500 hours to build one. So if you figured your time was worth $10, which is low today, how much you talking about? $25,000 in labor.
These are washers. This is an ordinary hardware store washer, 2.5-inch washer, bolted to a roller skate wheel. This one here is a 2.5-inch washer, soldered to a roller skate wheel. Originally, this was soldered in to make the shape of a wheel, and it's worn down, but only one of those wheels have ever come unsoldered in 25 years. It's tremendous use. And with good oiling, there's roller ball bearings in the roller skate wheels, so if you oil them every time you use it, it should last almost forever.
You have an engine here?
I have two engines, yeah, on a 2 3/4-inch, but one of them's really a 1-inch scale engine because it's oversized boiler and oversized pistons. It's a welded steel boiler, and it's a hard-working, rugged, tough little engine. I've had it 25 years. I just overhauled some of the running gear bearings, like crank pins, or the wear points that take a lot of beating, especially when you're pulling a lot of kids at a fair and things like that.
How's the ride, you guys?
Great.
Super.
Awesome.
Sensational.
Want us to sing too? We usually do.
You usually do.
I don't honestly know when locomotives as a hobby, but miniatures were built before the turn of the century. As a matter of fact, the first cog locomotive was built as a model. Kind of well, it proved that the idea could be practical, although he used leather belts for traction. And then when he got to the cog idea, he had something that was practical. Thomas Edison, he got into the models with electric locomotives. I guess models have been around almost as long as the prototype.
After the Second World War, That's when it started to take off. Prior to that, they had magazines, periodicals that were coming out of England on live steam projects, not necessarily locomotives, but stationary engines, model boats that were powered by steam.
This here is the first engine I built. Built it on a little Unimat, rotary valve, and it came out pretty good, so I thought I'd build another one, so I built this one here. And it goes very fast. It has absolutely no power. If a fly landed on a flywheel, it would quit. It's crude, but it was also a good beginner's engine. You can go from there. The next time I built one, I built a double-acting engine. A little bit smaller than this with a woof reverse gear. And that showed me how reverse gear worked, how the changing of the valve from one travel to the other changed the rotation of the engine.
It's labor intensive all around, right?
Well, it's very labor intensive. Of course, with the machinery they have today, they could shorten that up considerably, but the technology has advanced to the point now to where the steam engine is a thing of the past, as I knew it. Steam is still viable as means of power in one form or another, and I'm sure there'll always be steam.
It's a real shame to see the steam era just go away, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is. It was labor intensive, though. For example, these 5 engines that used to come out to Reading Highlands, a picture of them here. That took 3 men. They were gone all day, mind you, too, but there was a man took them till midnight, another man took them till they went out in the morning. That's 2 men, then they got the weekends, got to be with them all the time. That took 3 men every week.
You mean just keeping the steam pressure?
Just keeping the fires in them, yeah. Yeah. Every 30 days, the fires had to be dropped and the boilers washed out. Water, coal facilities had to be maintained. When the diesels came to Reading, in the winter, they leave the motors going, they leave the engines going, lock the doors in the cab. In the summer, shut the things off. Start them up like an automobile in the morning.
And when the diesel were taking over, of course, diesel fuel was available at 7 or 8 cents a gallon. And the coal was expensive because of the miner strikes and that sort of thing. So it was much more...
Was the mining union type activity really a factor?
Oh, that was a big factor in that.
You didn't be a technician to run steam. If it quit on the road, the guy got a hammer and a file, went out and fixed the darn thing, or brought it in on one side. Now they have to cut the unit out.
I think it was a very fascinating age when the steam engines were around, much more so than diesels. We lived across the street from the roundhouse, our first house, and we used to watch them come in. Watch the, actually that plate that's in the dining room is the last steam engine that went out of the roundhouse across the street from our house. I used to love to go to Montreal and watch the beautiful engines come out of Montreal. Beautiful, beautiful steam engines.
And I might add, if I may butt in here, she's never ridden on one of the trains. She won't do it.
Why is that? Are you afraid of the model?
He goes too fast.
It's too fast?
I build in all 3 gauges. This is 3/4 inch. I got 1 inch at home and I got 1.5 inches.
Tell them that that's a very special engine. It's the only B&M engine landed with Baker gear.
Oh, now, George, damn it all.
Interesting people. Very, very interesting people because they have depth to them. They just don't go out and just talk about how they hit a white little ball down the Gulf Lake. They don't tell you how they hit a tennis ball. They don't sit in a sailboat. They get there and they're mechanical. They time things, they tune things, they make things with their hands.
My fun is going to these gas and steam shows and trying to get the kids interested, because All right, I'll be 76 come, yeah. And what little I know, I don't want to die with me. I would like to get a bunch of kids, 16 or even earlier, interested in steam.
Remember back when we were kids, we'd come here every day. We watched the trains go by and dream of places far away.
Sometimes we would sit for hours, lost inside that dream, till we heard those engines coming, belching smoke and steam. But then one day Mama heard down at the store, she said pretty soon the steam trains won't come by here anymore. If you wanna see, you'd better run. She called out from the door, catch the last train running. Can't you hear that whistle blow? Catch the last train running. This is your last chance to go. Catch the last train running, and remember what you see, 'cause the train that leaves today will be tomorrow's history.
Remember when we reached the station, running hand in hand. The platform was so crowded, there was barely room to stand.
But the captain saw us smiling, waving like we'd always done. He said, you two will ride with me, 'cause this is my last run. And then, darling, we were riding high and proud. The captain told me, blow that whistle, blow it long and loud. And even through the noise, I heard you calling to the crowd. Catch the last train running. Can't you hear that whistle blow? Catch the last train running. This is our last chance to go. And that last train running for us is running still. It runs within our hearts, and there we know we always will. Catch the last train running. Can't you hear that whistle blow? It's the last train running. This is our last chance to go. Catch the last train running, 'cause there's nothing we can do. If this train's bound for glory, Lord, I pray it takes us to. If this train's bound for glory, Lord, I pray it takes us to. If this train's bound for glory, Lord, I pray it takes us to.
Winter is beautiful in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Miles away from the nearest civilization, only the silent sound of snow gently falling can be heard. Incredibly, the silence is broken by the sound of a distant whistle. No roads or railroad tracks are anywhere nearby, and yet we see a plume of smoke over the tops of the trees. What is it? A locomotive without rails? It seems like a snowmobile, bulldozer tracks with a steerable sled, but steam-powered. This is the Lombard log hauler, an invention that was patented by Alvin Lombard of Waterville, Maine in 1901. Before the Lombard was invented, the logging industry was limited to areas near rivers where the logs could be floated out of the deep woods to sawmills nearby.
having talked with the old-timers that had done the logging in the hills here up in the White Mountains, I had learned that Mr. Lombard of Waterville, Maine, had built 83 such machines, and all the dormant in 1938, when I bought my 2395 Elgin bicycle from Sears Roebuck and climbed aboard my bike to go 12 miles south on my first safari away from home to see a log hauler that had worked down in Campton. And money is an easy thing today. There's plenty of it. We think these are hard times here in 92, but these are easy times. A little bit of money would have gone a long ways back then, but none of us had money. But I did see a number of machines, and 5 of them were absolutely given to me outright if I would go into the woods and bring them out. One was by the Parker Young Company right here in Lincoln, and this is one of 2 that was in a building side by side. I had been told to pick for this one that had a good crankshaft. The only 2 that were out in civilization was the one up at Clayton Lake that belonged to K.C. Irving, who today is the Irving Gasoline Company. The other machine belonged to Lou Burris, and Lou used to take it out on the main street of Caribou, Maine during the February carnival period and run her up and down the street.
The Lombard log hauler was the first machine to feature the endlessly turning tracks used on construction equipment and army tanks ever since.
It is bewildering to me that on a first try, Lombard produced a crawler system that is fundamentally identical to this day. It is quite friction-free, a beautiful job on a first try, and the system has not been defied to this day. Here we have the sprocket, and we're driving from the rear, as all bulldozers do today. Lombard knew that, to drive from the rear to keep the tight pads on the bottom, whereas if he drove at the other end, he would be putting loose pads in, and it would be a poor ride.
In 1910, Alvin Lombard notified the Young Caterpillar Tractor Company that their products infringed upon his patent. Although Caterpillar agreed that Lombard was owed royalty money for his invention, it is believed that he never received a penny, despite the incredibly wide use of his rolling track concept. Before the Lombard log hauler, teams of horses and oxen were used to drag logs out of the forest to the rivers and mills.
Way behind us now. All right.
Ed Clark and his resourceful family and co-workers rescued their log hauler from the woods in Maine in order to restore it.
To have a Lombard, the biggest piece you need, of course, is the boiler. And we have heard of a boiler in Upper Maine. So we quickly made a toboggan out of sheet metal, about a half-inch thick, to go up and get this boiler, which was laying on its side. And we had seen it the previous winter in the snow. This is a fire tube boiler. The fire in the firebox goes through the tube, heats the water up to pressure, and then up the stack goes the smoke.
So everything from here all the way to the stack in the front is the boiler.
Yes.
Okay, and that's what you dragged out of the woods first.
Yes, that was the first major piece that we had to have if we were going to have a steam Lombard operation. And
to get to that point, we had made many phone calls. David Clark, Donnie Johnson, Edward Clark, and Polly Clark did a lot of searching around, a lot of false leads to finally end up with enough pieces to put a machine together.
So you got the boiler, the cylinders, and the differential, and all these gears and whatnot. And what about these sections, the track?
The pads came from many places where we were told Lombards had been cut up.
But you were actually digging around the mud trying to find these pieces.
Yes, yes. They weigh just about 50 pounds apiece. A lot of times the junkies left them because they had manganese in them and their big magnets wouldn't pick them up.
One blast is to stop, 2 is to go forward, and 3 blast means go backward. And I'm going to say to the steersman, give us the forward signal, steersman. There you have his signal, and then the second whistle to the rear is belonging to the engineer, and he will signal that he understands that to go forward, which is 2 blasts. Mr. Engineer, will you now give your signal? All right, that means it's acknowledged. Now, if the steersman didn't get what he wanted, he'd better start to blow his whistle real soon. These men cannot yell back and forth to each other while they're hauling out them logs. The rear whistle is a very unique one. It's known as a mockingbird whistle. It has 2 chords on it. It is worth your hearing it. They are a rarity. It is on here much as a novelty than anything else. Mr. Engineer, would you do that again, Mr. Engineer? Well, there you are. You have it. He changed the length of the resonance chamber with the second chord. And some of those mockingbird whistles can almost speak English. I guess that's enough on the whistles. I said I would take the time.
We blew Hal's ears off.
The Lombard log hauler, like the electric bulb, the telegraph, and the invention of the steam engine itself, is a classic example of modern inventiveness. The application of one man's logic to an incredibly practical problem.
If you look at this log hauler, as you may, you can see a terrific pride and dignity. There is no detail on here but what it was an essential detail. It had to be. There was nothing done to try to make the log hauler or the locomotive look pretty. Everything is absolutely functional. I only wish that you've had the opportunities that I've had in life, because I do feel them, I know them, I know why the smoke box is here. I can see the proud smokestack, and particularly when such machines as this are doing their work, you hear their personality. We call it stack music in the trade. The harder the load is that she is pulling, the more invigorating this machine becomes. The exhaust from her cylinders go into the nozzle, which is directly below the smokestack. And each exhaust blast goes up there, creating a vacuum on the firebox and the boiler, infuriating the fire, so that the harder the work is and the harder the load is, the harder the fire burns, and the more steam is produced. But there's something more to tell you about steam. It preceded the internal combustion engine, and steam locomotives, steam log haulers, are very human. If you have the right blood in your veins to recognize it, there's a personality to these machines, especially when they're under steam. A real steam man can feel the life that there is there. He can hear the little sounds and the little trickles and the parts to them. They are truly an air-breathing device, and they've got a personality.
Remember back when we were kids, watch the trains go by and dream of places far away.
Sometimes we would sit for hours, lost inside that dream, till we heard those engines coming, belching smoke and steam.
Overlooked, as so often the greatest ideas have been. Unacknowledged, as so much individual effort often is, but undoubtedly a 20th century marvel to behold. Beautiful, even magnificent.
Catch the last train running, can't you hear that whistle blow? Catch the last train running, this is your last chance to go.
Without people like the resourceful Clark family in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, another piece of shamefully recent history would be forgotten, like the antiquities of the past.